of first class now!
This is my paid seat.
Security will remove you! Follow crew orders now!
Check the manifest first. Activate Procto 7 now!
What did you guys just do?
Sir, you need to move to economy. This seat is not for someone like you. The words landed hard enough to silence the first-class cabin. For a second, nobody breathed. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. A rolling suitcase stopped in the aisle. The low hum of the aircraft seemed to fade under the weight of that one sentence. Caleb Warren sat in seat 1A by the window, his seatbelt fastened, his navy jacket folded neatly across his lap. He was 47, tall, broad-shouldered, with quiet eyes that had learned not to flinch too quickly. His shoes were polished. His watch was simple. His face gave away almost nothing. But inside, something old tightened. Across from him stood Melissa Reed, senior flight attendant, 39 years old, blonde hair pinned tight, red lipstick perfect, silver wings shining on her uniform. Her arms were crossed as if she had already made her decision before asking a single question. "Your ticket," she said. Caleb looked up slowly. "It was scanned at the gate," he replied. Melissa's smile did not move. "I still need to see it." A man in seat 1C lowered his newspaper. A woman across the aisle adjusted her glasses. 2 rows back, a young college student named Chloe Miller lifted her phone just enough to record without being obvious. Caleb reached into his leather folder and handed over the boarding pass. Melissa took it between 2 fingers, as if touching something unclean. She held it under the cabin light. Her eyes moved over the print. Liberty Air Flight 447, John F. Kennedy to Los Angeles, first class, seat 1A, Caleb Warren. Everything was correct. Still, Melissa did not hand it back. "This is unusual," she said. Caleb's voice stayed even. "What is unusual?" She glanced at his face, then down at his hands, then at the aisle behind him where other passengers were still boarding. "Passengers in this cabin usually check in differently," she said. "They usually know the process." The insult was quiet. That made it worse. Caleb felt the cabin listening, not openly, not honestly, but listening in the way people do when they want a scene without being responsible for it. He could smell warm coffee from the galley. He could hear the soft click of overhead bins closing. He could hear one woman whisper, "Is he in the wrong seat?" Melissa heard it too. Her chin lifted. "Sir," she said, louder now, "I am asking you to cooperate. We can make this easy. There is room in economy." Caleb did not answer right away. For one slow breath, he was not in that airplane. He was 8 years old again, standing outside a private swimming club in Maryland holding a towel under one arm, while a grown man told his father, "There are rules. Some families are not members here." His father had said nothing back then. He had only placed a hand on Caleb's shoulder and walked away. Caleb had never forgotten the weight of that hand. Not anger, not shame, restraint. Now, decades later, he sat in a first-class seat he had paid for, in a system his company quietly helped keep alive, while another person's explained where he did and did not belong. He took his boarding pass from Melissa's hand. "I'm not moving," he said. The cabin went still again. Melissa's eyes hardened. Behind her, the junior attendant, Maria Ellis, stepped closer and whispered, "Maybe we should check the manifest again." Melissa did not look at her. "I know what I'm doing," she said. Caleb turned toward the window. Outside, the afternoon light stretched across the tarmac like gold paint. Planes waited in line. Engines breathed. The world kept moving. But inside seat 1A, something had already stopped, and Melissa Reed had no idea that the man she was trying to remove was the one person on that aircraft who could make Liberty Air listen. Melissa Reed stood a little taller, as if his refusal had insulted the uniform itself. For years, she had been told that control was the heart of the job. Keep order. Keep the cabin calm. Keep problems small before they became public. But there was another lesson she had learned without anyone saying it out loud. Some passengers were treated like guests. Others were treated like risks. Caleb Warren had become a risk in her mind the moment he sat down. She turned toward the galley and raised 2 fingers. Brian Walsh appeared almost immediately. He was 44, the lead purser, square-jawed, silver-threaded hair, the kind of man who moved through an airplane like every aisle belonged to him. He adjusted his cuff, looked once at Melissa, then at Caleb. "What's going on?" he asked. Melissa did not hesitate. "This passenger is refusing to relocate," she said. "There may be an issue with his seat assignment." Brian looked down at Caleb, not at the boarding pass. That was the first thing Caleb noticed. Not the document, not the facts, the face. "Sir," Brian said, voice smooth and low, "we need to resolve this before departure." "It is resolved," Caleb said. "I'm in my assigned seat." Brian's mouth tightened. "Melissa says there's a concern." Caleb looked at him calmly. "Then check the manifest." Maria Ellis stood behind them, holding her service tablet against her chest. She was 28, new enough to still believe procedures were supposed to protect people, not corner them. Her eyes moved from Caleb to the tablet in her hand. "I can check it right now," she said softly. Melissa cut her a hard look. "Maria." The name landed like a warning. Maria stopped. Her fingers froze over the screen. In seat 2B, a mother with a sleeping child leaned into the aisle. "Excuse me," she said, careful but firm. He showed the ticket. "Why is this still happening?" The man in 1C snapped his newspaper shut. "Because the crew knows more than we do," he said. "Let them do their job." His name was Howard Blake, 62, retired real estate developer, used to speaking in rooms where nobody challenged him. He had seen Caleb's suit. He had seen the watch. Still, something in him had already decided that Caleb was the disruption, not the accusation. Across the aisle, Eleanor Hayes watched with her hands clasped around her purse. She was 72, a retired school principal from Queens. She had spent half her life watching children learn the difference between fairness and obedience. She knew the difference mattered. "That man has been calm," Eleanor said. "Calmer than most people would be." Howard turned. "Mom, we all want to leave on time. And some of us want to leave with our dignity," she replied. The cabin shifted. A quiet line had been drawn. Chloe Miller's phone was no longer hidden. The red recording light glowed near her thumb. Her heart was beating fast. She had only planned to film a short travel clip for her friends. Now thousands of strangers were joining her live feed, asking the same question in different words. Why are they doing this to him? Brian noticed the phone. "Miss," he said sharply, "you need to stop recording crew members." Chloe swallowed, but she did not lower it. "I'm recording what's happening," she said. Melissa's face flushed. "This is a private aircraft cabin." "No," Chloe said, her voice shaking. "It's a commercial flight." The words were small, but they hit hard. Brian stepped closer to Caleb. "Sir, if you continue refusing crew instructions, this becomes a security matter." Caleb let the sentence hang there. Security matter. 2 words that could turn a seated man into a threat. 2 words that could make witnesses doubt what they had seen with their own eyes. He looked at Brian, then at Melissa. "I have not raised my voice," Caleb said. "I have not threatened anyone. I have shown my boarding pass. I have answered every question. So be careful with the story you are building." For the first time, Brian blinked. Not because he was moved, because the language was precise. Caleb was not pleading. He was documenting. The aircraft door was still open, but the gate agent had stepped onto the jet bridge. The captain's voice came through the intercom, warm and practiced, asking passengers to settle in for an on-time departure to Los Angeles. The normal sounds returned for a moment. Seatbelts clicked, bins latched, a baby sighed in sleep. Then Melissa leaned toward Brian and spoke just loud enough for Caleb to hear. "Call airport security." Maria's face changed. It was quick, a flash of worry, a flash of shame. Caleb saw it, so did Eleanor. And in that narrow first-class cabin, under soft, golden light and polished promises of luxury, the truth became painfully clear. No one was confused anymore. They were choosing. Airport security arrived with the kind of quiet that made people sit up straighter. Officer Mark Bennett stepped into the first-class cabin first. He was 46, tired around the eyes, with a radio clipped to his shoulder and a hand resting near his belt. Not on his cuffs, not yet, but close enough for everyone to notice. Behind him came a gate supervisor named Denise Carter, a woman in her 50s with a tablet pressed against her ribs and a face trained by years of delayed flights, angry travelers, and impossible schedules. Melissa moved toward them quickly. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice lower now, more official. "This passenger is refusing crew instructions." Officer Bennett looked at Caleb, then at Melissa, then at Brian. "What instruction?" he asked. Melissa blinked once, to move to his correct seat. Caleb spoke before she could build more around it. "My correct seat is 1A. His voice was calm, not soft, calm. Officer Bennett turned to him. "Sir, do you have your boarding pass?" Caleb handed it over. Bennett took it, checked the name, the flight, the seat. His thumb paused over the printed line. Denise leaned in and looked at the screen on her tablet. For half a second, nobody said anything. That half second mattered. Maria saw it. Chloe saw it. Eleanor saw it too. The boarding pass was real. Denise cleared her throat. "The document appears valid." Melissa's jaw tightened. "There may be a system issue." Brian stepped in fast. "Officer, the concern is not only the ticket. It's the passenger's refusal to cooperate. We have to consider safety and crew authority." There it was. A new frame. A new story. Not wrong seat anymore. Safety. Caleb's eyes moved to Brian, slow and steady. "That is not what happened," he said. Howard in 1C muttered, "Oh, for heaven's sake." Eleanor turned toward him. "Let the man speak." Howard exhaled through his nose. "We are all trapped here because one person wants to make a point." Caleb looked at Howard then, not with anger, but with something more painful. "Recognition, sir," Caleb said. "I am trying to remain in the seat I paid for." Howard looked away first. The cabin air felt tighter. The overhead lights hummed. Somewhere in economy, a child laughed, unaware of the storm at the front of the plane. Officer Bennett shifted his weight. He had handled passenger removals before. Drunk travelers, people refusing masks years earlier, domestic arguments, seat disputes. But this was different. The man in 1A was not loud, not reckless, not unstable. That made the script harder to follow. "Mr. Warren," Bennett said carefully, reading the name from the pass, "the crew has authority over the cabin. If they ask you to step off so this can be resolved at the gate, I need you to comply." Caleb's hand rested on the armrest. Still, open, visible. "And if the crew is wrong?" he asked. Bennett did not answer right away. That silence said more than policy ever could. Melissa used it. "Sir, you are delaying this flight," she said. "Everyone here has places to be." A woman in 3B leaned forward. "I have a connection in Los Angeles. Can we please just go?" Chloe's live stream numbers climbed faster now. Comments flew by so quickly she could barely read them. Some defended Caleb. Some blamed him. Some just wanted drama. But buried between the noise were words that made her stomach twist. "This happens all the time. Keep recording. Do not let them rewrite it." Maria looked down at her tablet again. Her thumb hovered near the passenger manifest. She could check it. She could say it out loud. She could end this. But Melissa was watching her. Brian was watching her. And fear is not always loud. Sometimes fear is a young employee staring at a screen, knowing the truth, and wondering what it will cost to say it. Caleb saw her struggle. He did not rescue her from it. He simply said, "Maria, you know what the manifest says." Her eyes lifted. The cabin froze around her. Melissa snapped, "Do not involve my crew." Maria swallowed. Her face had gone pale. Denise Carter looked at her. "Maria?" The young attendant's voice came out barely above a whisper. "It says Mr. Warren is assigned to 1A. The words did not explode. They sank. Heavy. Final. Melissa's cheeks flushed red. Brian's expression hardened, not with regret but with irritation at losing control. Officer Bennett looked down at the pass again, then back at Caleb. For one brief moment, the right thing was sitting plainly in front of everyone. Then Brian said, "Assignment or not, he has now created a disruption." Caleb's face changed for the first time. Not anger, disappointment, deep, tired disappointment. He reached slowly into his jacket and pulled out his phone. Melissa stepped forward. "Sir, phones need to be in airplane mode." Caleb looked at the black screen in his hand. "Not yet," he said. His voice dropped, flat, controlled, dangerously quiet. "I need to make one call." Melissa Reed moved in front of Caleb like a door closing. "Sir," I said, "airplane mode." Caleb looked up at her, then at Officer Bennett, then at the passengers watching from behind polished glasses and half-lifted phones. "I heard you," he said. The words were not loud. They did not need to be. They carried the weight of a man who had spent his life learning when to speak, when to wait, and when waiting became surrender. Brian Walsh stepped closer. "Mr. Warren, do not make this worse." Caleb almost smiled at that. Worse. There it was again. The quiet demand that the person being mistreated should protect everyone else from discomfort. He unlocked his phone. Officer Bennett's hand shifted toward his cuffs. "Sir, I need you to stop." Caleb's thumb hovered over the screen. "I have complied with every reasonable request," he said. "Now I'm making a business call." Melissa gave a short, bitter laugh. "A business call?" Howard Blake muttered from 1C. "Unbelievable." Eleanor Hayes turned toward him, her voice low. "What is unbelievable is that proof was not enough." That sentence struck Caleb harder than anyone knew. Proof was not enough. It had followed him through schools, banks, boardrooms, hotels, and club entrances. Proof of education, proof of purchase, proof of invitation, proof of belonging. He had built an empire partly because he got tired of proving his humanity to people who had already decided against it. The phone connected. A woman answered on the first ring. "Warren Operations, this is Natalie." Caleb's eyes stayed on Melissa. "Natalie, this is Caleb. Authenticate voice, it's a secure line." The cabin seemed to lean forward. Natalie's tone changed at once. Professional, alert. Voice match confirmed, secure line active. "Are you safe, Mr. Warren?" That question made Maria's eyes flicker. "Are you safe? Not are you delayed, not are you angry. Safe." Caleb answered carefully. "I am seated on Liberty Air Flight 447 at JFK. First class, seat 1A. I am being pressured to leave the aircraft despite a verified paid ticket. Crew and airport security are present. Passenger recordings are active." Natalie paused for half a breath. Then her voice cooled. "Understood. Do you want legal on the line?" "Not yet." Melissa looked confused now. Brian looked irritated. Denise Carter, the gate supervisor, looked suddenly uneasy. Caleb continued. "Pull the Liberty Air Service Agreement. Confirm customer touchpoint discrimination clause and emergency continuity provisions." Brian's eyes narrowed. Denise's fingers began moving across her tablet. Officer Bennett listened in silence. Natalie replied, "Confirmed. Liberty Air Agreement active. Critical infrastructure support. Reservation services, departure control interfaces, passenger verification APIs, and operational failover. Clause 14.2 flagged." Caleb closed his eyes briefly. He had written that clause after a lawsuit involving another airline. Not for leverage, not for revenge, for accountability. Because systems that moved millions of people could not pretend human dignity was separate from operations. He opened his eyes. "Prepare Protocol 7, he said. Natalie did not question him. Protocol 7 prepared, awaiting executive confirmation. The words sat in the cabin like a locked door. Melissa finally spoke. Her voice had lost some of its edge. "What is Protocol 7? Caleb looked at her. "A pause," he said. Brian scoffed. "Sir, you are not in a position to pause anything." Caleb held his gaze. "No, Brian. That is what you assumed." The captain's voice came over the intercom before anyone could answer. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Andrew Morrison. We are just waiting on a final cabin matter and expect to push back shortly. Please remain seated." The announcement should have calmed people. It did not. Chloe whispered into her phone, "Something is happening. He knows their system." Her live stream had grown beyond friends now. Strangers were sharing it. Retired teachers, lawyers, airline workers, grandparents who had lived long enough to recognize old prejudice wearing a new uniform. Denise Carter stepped closer to Brian and lowered her voice. "We need to verify who he is." Brian snapped quietly. "We know who he is. A passenger refusing instructions." Caleb heard every word, so did Maria. And Maria, still pale, did something small but brave. She turned her tablet toward Denise. "His passenger profile," she whispered. "Look at the corporate writ note." Denise looked. Her face changed. Just a little. Enough. Caleb spoke into the phone. "Natalie." "Yes, Mr. Warren." "Activate Protocol 7. Limited scope. Liberty Air operational hold. No passenger data exposure. No safety systems touched. Notify their executive escalation channel." Natalie's voice was steady, confirming. Limited operational hold. Reservation and departure authorization services only. Safety systems excluded. Executive channel notification active. Officer Bennett took one step back. Melissa's lips parted. Brian stared as if the air had shifted shape. Then the gate agent's radio crackled. A voice burst through, sharp with alarm. Denise, we just lost departure authorization on 447. System is rejecting release. A second voice came through from the cockpit. Gate, this is Morrison. Our flight plan just dropped from the release queue. What changed? No one answered. No one moved. Caleb lowered the phone from his ear. Outside the window, the aircraft beside them began to push back, its engines rising like distant thunder. But Liberty Air Flight 447 stayed still. And for the first time since Melissa had spoken to him, the entire cabin understood that Caleb Warren had not been trapped in their system. They were trapped in his. The first sound was not panic. It was a soft chime from Denise Carter's tablet. Then another. Then three more. Her screen filled with red alerts, each one more urgent than the last. Departure authorization unavailable. Reservation bridge timeout. Executive escalation triggered. Critical vendor hold. Denise stared at the tablet as if it had become a foreign object in her hands. Brian Walsh leaned over her shoulder. What does that mean? Denise did not answer. She knew exactly what it meant. Not the full technical detail maybe, but enough. Liberty Air did not own all the systems passengers assumed it owned. Like most major airlines, it depended on outside infrastructure. Booking, check-in, passenger verification, departure release. A complicated web of vendors and contracts behind every smooth boarding smile. And someone had just pulled one thread. Captain Morrison's voice came over the intercom again, this time tighter. Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing a brief system delay. Please remain seated while our ground team works through it. Brief. The word tried to sound harmless. It failed. Passengers reached for phones. Howard Blake jabbed at his screen, searching Liberty Air delays. The woman in 3B groaned and whispered, I'm going to miss my connection. The sleeping child in 2B stirred as the cabin pressure of human frustration began to rise. Melissa was still facing Caleb, but her confidence had cracked around the edges. What did you do? She asked. Caleb set his phone on the armrest, screen facing down. I followed a contract. Brian laughed once, dry and forced. You expect us to believe you can stop an airline with a phone call? Caleb looked at him. No. I expect you to believe the systems you rely on are governed by agreements. And agreements include consequences. Maria's breath caught. Consequences. That word moved differently through the cabin. It did not sound like revenge. It sounded like a door closing because somebody had ignored too many warnings. Officer Bennett stepped closer but slower now. Mr. Warren, are you saying you have access to Liberty Air systems? I am saying my company supports them. Denise looked up sharply. Your company? Caleb reached into his folder and removed a matte black business card. He handed it to Denise first. Not to Melissa, not to Brian. Denise read it. Her face changed completely. Caleb Warren, founder and chief executive officer, Warren Systems. The cabin did not see the card, but it saw her reaction. Brian reached for it. Denise did not hand it over. Instead, she tapped her tablet with quick, nervous movements. Warren Systems, she whispered. The name spread in pieces. First to Maria, then to Chloe's live stream, then to Eleanor. Howard heard it and frowned into his phone. He typed with stiff fingers. His face went pale before he meant for it to. Warren Systems was not famous like a consumer brand. It did not sell phones or sneakers or streaming shows. It lived behind the curtain, quiet, essential. The company handled reservation infrastructure for airlines, hotel groups, and transportation networks across the country. Millions of passengers moved through tools it had built and maintained. And Caleb Warren, the man they had tried to send to economy, owned the signature on that system. Denise's tablet rang. She answered at once. This is Denise Carter at JFK Gate 27. A man's voice came through, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Denise, this is Operations Control. Is there a Caleb Warren on board Flight 447? Denise looked at Caleb. Yes, she said carefully. He is seated in first class. A pause. Then the voice changed. Do not remove him from that aircraft. The words were clear. No one breathed. Melissa's mouth opened, then closed. Brian's eyes flicked toward Officer Bennett, looking for authority to return to him. But Bennett had gone still. He had heard the instruction. He understood tone. He had spent decades hearing the difference between a request and a command. Operations control continued. Robert Langford is being notified. Legal is joining the bridge. Keep the aircraft at the gate. Denise swallowed. Understood. The call ended. The cabin remained frozen. Then Chloe whispered to her phone. They just said not to remove him. Her voice shook. Not with excitement now. With the strange fear that comes when a private wrong becomes public truth. Melissa took one step back from Caleb. It was small, but everyone saw it. Caleb did not enjoy it. That surprised Maria most of all. There was no smile, no victory in his face. Only the tired focus of a man who knew power was dangerous if it was used only to wound. He turned to Melissa. You could have checked the manifest, he said. You could have listened when Maria told you. You could have treated a passenger as a person before treating him as a problem. Melissa's eyes flashed, defensive and embarrassed. I was following procedure. Eleanor's voice came from across the aisle, soft but firm. No, dear, you were hiding behind it. That sentence landed harder than any raised voice. Brian straightened, trying one last time to reclaim control. This conversation should happen off the aircraft. Caleb looked at him. It should have never needed to happen at all. The intercom clicked again, but no announcement followed. Only static, then silence. Outside, another Liberty Airjet sat motionless at the next gate. Its jet bridge remained attached. Ground crew members stood below, looking at their handheld devices with confused faces. One flight had become two. Two could become 20. The pause was spreading, and somewhere high above them, in a corporate office far from the smell of coffee and jet fuel, Liberty Air's chief executive was about to learn that a seat dispute in first class had become a test of the entire company. Robert Langford's call came through Caleb's phone less than 3 minutes later. The name appeared on the screen before the ringtone finished its first breath. Robert Langford, Chief Executive Officer, Liberty Air. Caleb looked at it for a moment, then answered on speaker. Robert. The first-class cabin heard the strain before they heard the words. Robert's voice carried the clipped urgency of a man speaking from a room full of alarms. Caleb, tell me this is not what I think it is. Caleb leaned back in seat 1A. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes were not. That depends what you think it is. A low murmur moved through the cabin. Melissa's face drained of color. Brian Walsh stood very still, as if movement might make him more visible. Denise Carter took one step away from the aisle, tablet clutched against her chest. Robert exhaled sharply. Our departure control bridge is holding release across multiple stations. JFK, Atlanta, Dallas, Denver. We are seeing escalation flags from Warren Systems. Legal says Clause 14.2 has been triggered. Howard Blake whispered, Good Lord. Chloe's hand trembled around her phone. Caleb kept his voice measured. Correct. Robert went silent. Not because he did not understand, because he understood too well. The contract between Liberty Air and Warren Systems was not decorative. It was not a document people signed and forgot in a digital folder. It governed the invisible machinery that made the airline move. Tickets, passenger records, gate release, backup synchronization, vendor accountability, and buried inside it was a clause Robert had personally approved years earlier, after a wave of public complaints about passenger mistreatment. Any verified discriminatory act at a customer touchpoint could trigger an emergency governance review. At the time, it had sounded noble. Now it had teeth. Robert's voice lowered. Caleb, what happened on that aircraft? Caleb looked at Melissa. She tried to hold his gaze, but could not. I was asked to move from a paid first-class seat to economy, Caleb said, after my ticket was verified, after the manifest confirmed my assignment, after a junior crew member stated the truth. Your senior crew continued framing me as a disruption. Robert's breathing changed. Who made the call? No one moved. Caleb did not raise his voice. Melissa Reed initiated it. Brian Walsh escalated it. Airport security was called after the facts were available. Officer Bennett lowered his eyes. Not in guilt alone, but in recognition. He had been brought into a story already tilted against the passenger, and he had nearly helped complete it. Robert spoke again, slower now. Is anyone injured? No. Is the aircraft safe? Yes. Is this on video? Chloe almost laughed, but it came out like a nervous breath. Caleb looked toward her phone. From several angles, Robert muttered something away from the phone. A door closed on his end. The noise behind him softened. When he came back, his voice had changed. Less CEO. More man, Caleb, I am sorry. The words were simple. They did not fix anything. But Eleanor Hayes closed her eyes briefly, as if even a late apology still had some value when spoken plainly. Caleb answered after a long pause. I believe you are sorry right now, Robert, but I need Liberty Air to be different when this call ends. That sentence hit harder than anger would have. Melissa's lips pressed together. Brian swallowed. Maria looked down, blinking fast. Robert said, "Tell me what you need." Caleb opened his laptop. The screen lit his face in pale blue. His fingers moved over the keys, steady, exact. Not hurried, not theatrical. The cabin watched him like they were watching a judge write the first line of a sentence. First, Caleb said, Melissa Reed is removed from customer duty pending an independent investigation. Melissa inhaled sharply. Second, Liberty Air will require anti-bias and passenger dignity training for all frontline employees within 60 days. Not a slide deck, not a checkbox. Live training, measured outcomes, recorded completion. Brian's jaw flexed. Third, Caleb continued, you will create an independent reporting channel for discrimination complaints, outside the normal station chain. Reports cannot be buried by the same managers involved. Robert did not answer immediately. From the phone, faint voices rose again. Lawyers, operations people, someone saying cost exposure, someone else saying media risk. Caleb's eyes hardened. This is not media risk, he said. This is human risk. Your company nearly removed a paying passenger because the truth made your crew uncomfortable. Silence. Then Robert said, and if we agree, Warren Systems releases the operational hold in phases. Flight 447 departs. Your network recovers, and if we do not. Caleb turned the laptop slightly. Denise could see the top line of a document. Termination of service agreement. Her face went white. Caleb's voice was quiet. Then Liberty Air has 72 hours to transition mission-critical infrastructure under the emergency exit clause. You and I both know that is not enough time. Robert's answer came after one long breath. You will have written agreement within the hour. The cabin stayed silent. No applause. No celebration. Just the heavy awareness that power had entered the room, and for once it had not been used to crush the powerless. It had been used to force a system to look in the mirror. Melissa Reed sank into the jump seat, as if her knees had finally remembered gravity. For the first time since Caleb boarded, she looked small. Not weak. Not harmless. Just human in the way people become human when the story they told themselves begins to break apart. Robert Langford was still on speaker. Caleb, he said, I can authorize the suspension and the investigation now. The training and reporting structure will need board approval, but I can commit to an emergency session today. Caleb watched Melissa's hands. They were clasped so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Put it in writing, he said. You will have it. And Robert. Yes. Melissa Reed attends the first training session. Melissa's head lifted. Brian turned toward Caleb, startled. That is not your call. Caleb did not look at him. She attends the first session. Then she helps build the next one. Melissa's face twisted, caught between fear and insult. You want me to be humiliated twice? No, Caleb said. His voice slowed. I want you to understand what happened here well enough that you never do it to anyone else. And then I want you to stand in front of other people wearing that same uniform and tell them what it cost you to learn. The cabin went quiet in a different way now. Not shocked. Listening. Melissa stared at him. Her eyes were wet, though she fought hard to keep the tears from falling. She had expected punishment. She had prepared herself for firing, public shame, maybe a lawsuit. She had not prepared for responsibility. Responsibility was heavier. I was trying to protect the cabin, she said, but the sentence sounded weak even to her. Caleb nodded once, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement. That may be what you told yourself. Melissa flinched, he continued. But protection without fairness becomes control, and control without humility becomes harm. Maria lowered her eyes. The words found her too. She had known the truth and delayed saying it. She had not caused the fire, but she had watched the first smoke and stayed quiet. Officer Bennett cleared his throat. "Mr. Warren," he said, voice rougher. "Now, I need to say something." Caleb turned toward him. Bennett's hand was no longer near his cuffs. Both hands hung open at his sides. "When I came on board, I listened to the crew first. I treated their version as the starting point. I should have treated the facts as the starting point." Nobody spoke. Bennett looked at Caleb, not away. "I am sorry." The apology was not polished. It did not sound like corporate language. It sounded like a man uncomfortable with his own reflection and choosing not to look away. Caleb gave a small nod. "Thank you, officer." Eleanor Hayes whispered, "That is where change starts." Howard Blake heard her. This time, he did not argue. Robert's voice returned through the phone. "Caleb, legal is drafting the written commitment now. I will sign it personally. Can we begin phased restoration?" Caleb looked toward Chloe. Her phone was still raised. Her eyes were wide, but not childish anymore. She had seen how quickly a person could be turned into a problem, and how much courage it took for witnesses to stay awake. "Chloe," Caleb said. She froze. "Me? Yes. Are you still recording?" She nodded. "I want you to keep recording, not for spectacle. For memory." Her throat tightened. "Okay." Caleb turned back to the phone. "Robert, Phase 1 restoration begins when I receive your written acknowledgement of the 3 commitments. Phase 2 when the suspension notice is issued. Full restoration when legal confirms the board meeting is scheduled." Brian shook his head, stunned. "You are negotiating this in front of passengers?" Caleb looked at him at last. "Yes, because what happened was done in front of passengers." That ended the argument. Denise Carter's tablet chimed again. This time, the alert was different. "Incoming executive document. Signature requested." She looked at Caleb, then at Melissa, then at the cabin full of witnesses. The world outside the window was still moving. Baggage carts rolled by. A ground worker raised orange wands. Rain clouds gathered beyond the terminal glass. Inside the aircraft, nobody moved. Caleb opened the document on his laptop. His eyes scanned each line. Suspension pending investigation. Mandatory live training within 60 days. Independent reporting channel. Emergency board review. Public statement acknowledging passenger dignity failure. He read the last line twice. Then he looked at Melissa. "This is not the end of your career unless you choose not to learn from it." Melissa's tears finally fell. Not loudly, not dramatically, just one line down her cheek. "I do not know how to fix what I did," she said. Caleb's expression softened, but only slightly. "Start by telling the truth." The words settled over her like a sentence and a doorway. On the phone, Robert waited. Caleb placed his finger above the keyboard. "Phase 1, he said to Natalie, who was still listening on the secure line. "Restore limited departure authorization for Flight 447. A second later, the cockpit radio crackled. Captain Morrison's voice came through, careful and amazed. "Gate, we have release back." A breath moved through the cabin. Not relief alone, something deeper. The feeling of a system being forced, for one rare moment, to answer to the person it had nearly erased. The aircraft did not move right away. Even with release restored, the cabin stayed suspended in a silence that felt heavier than any delay. Captain Morrison gave the standard announcement, but his voice carried something new beneath the professional calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have received our updated release. We expect to push back shortly. Thank you for your patience." Patience. The word landed strangely after everything they had seen. Melissa stood near the galley now, no longer guarding the aisle. Her arms were no longer crossed. She kept one hand on the edge of the counter as if the aircraft had already taken off, and she needed balance. Brian Walsh stared at the floor. Maria Ellis moved quietly through first class, checking seatbelts with gentle hands and a face full of things she had not yet found words for. When she reached Caleb, she stopped. "Mr. Warren," she said. He looked up. Her voice shook, but she did not step back from it. "I should have said something sooner." Caleb studied her for a moment. He could have told her yes. He could have let the guilt sit there. But he saw the young woman beneath the uniform. He saw the fear of losing a job, the fear of challenging a superior in front of a cabin, the fear that truth might not protect her either. Yes, he said. You should have. Maria swallowed. Then Caleb added, but you did say it. Remember how hard that felt. Next time, say it earlier. Her eyes filled, but she nodded. I will. That small exchange traveled through the cabin more quietly than the shutdown had, but for some people, it mattered more. It showed something the dramatic moment had not. Accountability did not have to be cruelty. Correction did not have to erase compassion. Eleanor Hayes leaned across the aisle. You were brave, young lady, she told Maria. Maria let out a breath that sounded almost like a sob. I did not feel brave, Eleanor smiled sadly. Most people do not while it is happening. A few rows back, Chloe lowered her phone for the first time. Her live stream was still running, but her arm ached, and her heart felt older than it had that morning. Comments continued racing across the screen. Some demanded firings, some wanted lawsuits, some called Caleb a hero. But Chloe kept hearing his words. For memory, not spectacle. She turned the camera slightly away from Melissa's face. Somehow that felt right. Howard Blake shifted in seat 1C. His pride fought him hard. It told him to stay quiet, to pretend he had only been impatient, to hide inside the excuse of wanting an on-time flight. But shame has a sound. It is the dry click in the throat before an apology. Mr. Warren, Howard said. Caleb turned. Howard removed his reading glasses and folded them slowly. His hands were older than his voice had sounded earlier. I was wrong, he said. I assumed the crew must be right because that was easier for me. The cabin listened. Howard's face reddened, but he kept going. I should not have said what I said. Caleb looked at him without softness and without hatred. Remember this feeling, Caleb said. The next time someone is being singled out, do not wait until power proves them worthy of respect. Howard nodded once. It was not forgiveness, not exactly. It was instruction. Officer Bennett stood near the front, speaking quietly into his radio. His report had changed. He did not call Caleb disruptive. He did not call the situation passenger non-compliance. He said verified ticket, crew escalation, bias concern, executive review. Each word mattered. Reports became records. Records became truth or cover. This time he chose truth. Melissa heard him. Her eyes closed. The aircraft door sealed with a clean mechanical thud. The sound rolled through the cabin like a final mark on the day. Captain Morrison came out briefly before pushback. He stepped into the first-class aisle and looked at Caleb. Mr. Warren, he said, I owe you an apology as captain of this aircraft. I should have come out sooner. I should have asked better questions before the situation reached this point. Caleb nodded. Thank you, Captain. Morrison glanced toward Melissa and Brian. We will complete this flight professionally. After landing, there will be statements. There will be review. There will be no retaliation against any crew member who told the truth. Maria looked up sharply. So did Melissa. That sentence mattered too. The plane finally began to move. Slowly at first, a gentle backward roll from the gate. The terminal lights slid past the windows. Ground crew raised their hands. Engines deepened into a steady roar. No one clapped, no one cheered. They simply sat with what had happened. As the aircraft turned toward the taxiway, Caleb looked out at the runway lights, stretching ahead in two clean lines. His reflection hovered in the glass. The boy outside the swimming club. The man in seat 1A. The CEO with the power to stop a system. The human being who had still needed witnesses to be believed. He closed his eyes for one breath, then opened them. The plane accelerated. The cabin pressed back. And when the wheels lifted from the ground, everyone on board knew the flight to Los Angeles had become something larger than travel. It had become a lesson. And lessons, when witnessed, have a way of landing far beyond the runway. 30 days later, the morning sun rose over Los Angeles with the clean brightness that comes after a night of rain. From the 42nd floor of Warren Systems headquarters, the city looked washed and sharpened. Glass towers caught the light. Freeways curved below like silver ribbons. Planes moved in the far distance, tiny and quiet, crossing the pale blue sky. Caleb Warren stood by the window with a cup of black coffee cooling in his hand. He had slept little, not because of guilt, Because follow-through takes more discipline than outrage. Behind him, Natalie Price entered the conference room, carrying a thick report in a white binder. She was 41, Chief Operating Officer of Warren Systems, and one of the few people who could tell Caleb the truth without softening it first. The 30-day report from Liberty Air, she said. Caleb turned from the window. All of it, all of it. Legal, training, complaint intake, station compliance, executive notes. She placed the binder on the table. It landed with a dull thud. Caleb sat. For a moment he did not open it. He remembered the cabin, Melissa's crossed arms, Brian's careful language, Maria's pale face, Officer Bennett's apology, Chloe's trembling phone, Eleanor's quiet courage. A story could go viral in an hour. A system took longer to move. He opened the binder. The first page showed numbers. Frontline employees assigned to live anti-bias training. Completed, 94%. Independent reporting channel launched. Active in 67 stations. Passenger dignity policy revised. Distributed system-wide. Bias-related complaints in the first month after launch. Down by 31% compared with the previous monthly average. Caleb read each line without smiling. Natalie watched him. That is a strong start. A start, he said. She nodded. She understood the difference. A knock came at the glass door. Rachel Moore, Caleb's executive assistant, sat in holding a cream-colored envelope. Rachel was 36, precise, warm, and fiercely protective of his time. She had seen him through mergers, lawsuits, and boardroom wars. But lately, she had seen something else in him. Not weakness. A kind of heaviness that came from becoming a symbol before having time to process the wound. This came by courier, Rachel said. Marked personal. Caleb took the envelope. His name was written by hand. Mr. Warren, no title, no company, just the man. He opened it slowly. Inside was a letter. The handwriting was neat but uneven in places, as if the person had stopped more than once to breathe. Mr. Warren, it began. I have rewritten this letter 11 times. None of them felt honest enough. So I will keep this plain. I was wrong. Caleb's eyes paused there. Natalie looked away, giving him privacy without leaving the room. He continued reading. I thought I was enforcing standards. I now understand I was protecting an image in my head. I mistook my discomfort for judgment. Mistook authority for accuracy. I embarrassed you because I had already decided what belonged in first class before I looked at the facts. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. Caleb read on. The training was difficult. Not because anyone attacked me. Because they did not. They asked me to watch the recording. Then they asked me what I saw. The first time I defended myself. The second time I noticed Maria. The third time I noticed your hands. Open, still, visible. I had called you a threat while you were doing everything possible not to be seen as one. Caleb set the letter down for a moment. Outside, a plane cut across the sky. His father's old hand returned to his shoulder in memory. Walk away, son. Not because they are right. Because you must survive long enough to become bigger than this gate. Caleb picked up the letter again. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am asking for the chance to become useful. Liberty Air has reassigned me to the passenger dignity training team for 1 year. My first session is next Monday in Chicago. I will tell them the truth. I will tell them I was not destroyed by accountability. I was introduced to it. Melissa Reed. Caleb folded the letter carefully. Rachel spoke softly. Are you okay? He looked up. For a long time, he did not answer. Then he said, I think this is what change feels like before it becomes visible. Natalie slid another document across the table. There is more. 3 other airlines have requested meetings. 2 hotel groups. 1 national car rental chain. They all want the framework. Caleb looked at the Liberty Air report again. 1 seat. 1 accusation. 1 pause. Now boardrooms were moving. Policies were being rewritten. People who had never met him were being trained to see customers more clearly. His phone buzzed. A message from Chloe Miller appeared on the screen. Mr. Warren, my grandmother watched the video. She cried. She said she waited 60 years to see someone stay calm and still make them listen. Caleb closed his eyes. That was the part no contract could measure. Not the lost minutes. Not the restored system. Not the corporate statement. The healing lived somewhere quieter. In a grandmother feeling seen. in a young attendant learning to speak sooner, in a woman who caused harm choosing to teach against it. Caleb opened his laptop and began typing his reply to Melissa. "Thank you for telling the truth." He stopped there, then added one more line. "Do not waste the pain." 6 months later, Caleb Warren stood backstage at the National Civil Rights Conference in Washington, D.C., listening to the sound of 3,000 people settling into silence. On the screen behind the podium, the title of the session waited in clean white letters: Power, Dignity, and the Cost of Looking Away. Caleb adjusted his cuffs. No cameras were in his face yet. No lawyers, no airline executives. Just the low buzz of the hall, the soft click of microphones, and the steady breath of a man who knew this moment was bigger than him. In the front row sat Eleanor Hayes, hands folded over her purse. Beside her was Chloe Miller, now interning with a public interest media group. A few seats away sat Officer Mark Bennett, off-duty, wearing a plain gray suit. Maria Ellis sat near the aisle, shoulders straight, eyes bright. And 3 rows behind them sat Melissa Reed. She looked different, not smaller, clearer. Her hair was still pinned neatly. Her uniform was gone. In its place was a navy blazers and a visitor badge that read Liberty Air Passenger Dignity Training Team. Brian Walsh sat beside her, quiet, humbled, no longer protected by the old language of procedure. When Caleb walked onto the stage, the room rose. The applause was not wild. It was heavy, respectful, the kind that carries memory. He stood at the podium and waited until the hall became still. 6 months ago, he began, "I was a passenger trying to get from New York to Los Angeles." His voice was low, clear. "I had a ticket. I had a seat. I had proof." And for a while, proof was not enough. The room did not move. Caleb looked toward Melissa, not to shame her, but to include the truth. "I was asked to leave a seat I had paid for, because someone looked at me and made a decision before checking the facts. Then others supported that decision because it was easier to trust authority than question unfairness." Melissa lowered her eyes, then lifted them again. "That was courage, too," Caleb continued. Liberty Air could have treated that day as a public relations problem. Instead, under pressure, yes, but also under witness, it became a turning point. The screen changed behind him. Bias-related complaints down. Independent reporting active. Live training completed across the company. New passenger dignity standards adopted by other travel and service companies. The numbers were not exaggerated. They did not need to be. They were enough. Warren Systems had power that day, Caleb said. Contractual power, economic power, operational power. But power alone is not justice. Power can punish. Power can silence. Power can humiliate. Justice begins when power is used to protect dignity, especially for people who are usually expected to swallow the insult and move on. The applause started, then faded as he raised one hand. "I do not want this story remembered as the day one man stopped an airline. I want it remembered as the day a cabin full of people learned that silence has weight." He turned toward Chloe. A young woman recorded, not to chase attention, but to preserve the truth. Chloe wiped her cheek. He turned toward Eleanor. A retired principal spoke when silence would have been easier. Eleanor nodded once. He turned toward Maria. A junior flight attendant found her voice before the lie became official. Maria pressed a hand to her chest. Then Caleb looked at Melissa. "And a woman who harmed me chose not to hide forever inside shame. She chose to learn. She chose to teach. That does not erase what happened, but it proves people can become more than their worst moment if accountability is real." The hall stood again. This time, Melissa cried openly. No spectacle, no performance, just release. After the speech in the quiet backstage corridor, Melissa approached Caleb. Her steps were careful. "Mr. Warren," she said, "my first training class was in Chicago. I told them everything. Not the version that protected me, the real one." Caleb looked at her. "And?" She breathed in. 2 attendants stayed afterward. Both said they had seen things before and said nothing. They asked what to do next time. Caleb's expression softened. "That is how it spreads." Melissa nodded. "I am sorry, I know. I will keep earning the second chance. That is all anyone can do." Outside, afternoon light poured across the marble steps of the convention center. People gathered in small circles, talking quietly, some with tears in their eyes. some calling loved ones, some simply standing still as if remembering moments when they had stayed silent and wishing they could go back. Caleb stepped into the sunlight. For a moment he saw not the crowd, but the little boy outside that swimming club gate. The boy who had been told not everyone belonged. The boy whose father had placed a steady hand on his shoulder and taught him to survive without surrendering his dignity. Caleb wished his father could see this. Not the applause, the change, the truth on record, the witnesses who did not look away. He walked down the steps slowly, no longer carrying only the wound of seat 1A, but the proof that a wound, handled with courage, could become a doorway for others. And if this story moved you, remember this the next time you see someone being judged before they are known. Do not wait for power to prove they matter. Speak sooner. Stand closer. Be the witness who helps truth survive. If you believe dignity belongs to every person in every seat, share this story, subscribe for more, and write stand up in the comments so others know they are not alone.